You're not out of options. You're just too overwhelmed and panicked to see them right now. But it's what you do next that matters most, because you can't panic your way into finding peace. So if you're feeling desperate right now, I want you to pause and listen to this first. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through how to tackle desperation the smart way, so you can protect your peace and respond to whatever's going on with clarity, not chaos. So let's talk about desperation. Hello and welcome back to the Let's Talk About Mental Health podcast. I'm Jeremy Godwin. If it's your first time here, this show is all about better mental health, with straightforward and practical advice to help you protect your peace and take back control of your mental well-being. This week I'm talking about how to navigate feeling desperate so you can start making smarter choices and so you can find peace of mind. This topic was suggested by a listener, so a big thanks to Liam for sending it in. Desperation is vile. It makes everything feel like it's an emergency, even when it's not. And when you're in that state, your thoughts will spiral, your heart starts racing, and it feels like you're drowning in your own life. You start reacting instead of responding. And that's when things often go from bad to worse. Because desperation is messy, it's loud, it's urgent, and it's about as fun as a Real Housewives reunion gone wrong. And if you don't understand what's really going on underneath it, the fear, the unmet needs, the stories your mind is telling you, then it can lead you to choices that you end up regretting. Or worse, it can convince you that you're beyond help, but you're not. Feeling desperate doesn't mean you're broken. It's a sign that something inside of you is crying out for relief. And that means that there's something worth listening to, even if it feels impossible to sit with it right now. Today, I want to help you understand what's actually happening in your mind when you feel desperate, and more importantly, how to interrupt the spiral before it takes over. Because this feeling doesn't mean that you've run out of options, it just means that you're overwhelmed and your brain is currently trying to survive. So, if you're feeling like you're at your limit, you're in the right place, because this episode is going to give you practical tools to slow your thoughts, manage the panic, and respond in ways that support your well-being, not tear it down. Because better mental health isn't about always being calm. It's about knowing how to ground yourself when you're not calm. Now, just quickly, you might have noticed I covered hopelessness last week. And I just want to flag that while desperation and hopelessness might feel a little similar, they're very, very different experiences. Hopelessness is more about shutting down, while desperation is urgent and reactive. If that quieter, more paralyzing feeling of hopelessness is something you're dealing with too, then check out episode 297 for a full set of tools. So let's start by talking about what is desperation. Desperation is a very specific state of emotional overwhelm where you feel like you have no options left. And that unbearable pressure often pushes you to do something, anything, just to escape the discomfort. It's panic-fueled, it's chaotic, and it doesn't always look like what you'd expect. Sometimes it's loud and dramatic, crying, yelling, reacting in ways that don't make sense, even to you. And other times, it's quiet, withdrawing, shutting down, fantasizing about running away or disappearing, because everything just feels like it's too much. Either way, desperation hijacks your ability to think clearly. It narrows your focus until the only thing that you can see is the pain and the fastest way out of it. At its core, desperation is about fear. It's your mind and body going into survival mode. Your brain tells you that the situation you're in is either dangerous or unbearable, and it convinces you that unless you do something right now, right this minute, you're just not going to be okay. But the thing is that when you're desperate, the danger isn't always real. It just feels real. And that's enough to send your brain into overdrive. Now, this is where all of this comes in with mental health, because desperation doesn't just come out of nowhere. It builds, often slowly and often over time, like when you've been under too much pressure for too long. When you've been holding it together for everyone else, but ignoring your own needs. When you've had to stay strong while quietly feeling like you're falling apart. And then one day, something tips you over the edge, and suddenly you're spiraling. You're impulsive, emotional, reactive. And it's not because you're weak, but it's because your nervous system is fried, and your brain is screaming for relief. And no, screaming back at it doesn't help. I've tried. But sometimes desperation builds from the smaller stuff, the kind of stuff that seems harmless until it piles up like dishes in the sink, and suddenly you're out of both clean mugs and patience. It's the quiet loneliness, the constant second-guessing yourself, the sense that no matter what you do, it's just never enough. Desperation doesn't always come from crisis. Sometimes it comes from feeling chronically unsupported or misunderstood or unseen. And when that builds up over time, it can push you into behaviors that don't reflect who you really are, but that feel like the only way to make the pain stop. Now, let me just clarify here that desperation and hopelessness can feel somewhat similar, but they're very, very different. Hopelessness that I covered last week is quiet and paralyzing. It's like giving up. Whereas desperation is urgent and reactive. It pushes you to act right now, right this second, to escape the pain. If you do struggle with that quieter shutdown feeling, then I covered hopelessness, like I said last week. So go and check that out for a set of complete tools around how to manage that. But in terms of desperation, what makes it so dangerous is that it leads you to start making decisions from a place of fear, not from a place of strength. You might say things that you don't mean. You might make big, irreversible choices. You could sabotage relationships, or you might give up on something that still had potential. And that's why learning to recognize desperation matters, because if you can see it for what it is, then you can start to take back control of how you respond to it. Because the truth is that desperation isn't who you are. It's a state you're in. It's a temporary, stressful, overwhelming state that clouds your judgment and messes with your perception of what's possible. And the more clearly you can understand that, the more power you have to slow things down so that you can then respond in ways that actually support your mental health instead of harming it. This is about responding thoughtfully rather than just reacting on the basis of pure emotion. So now let's talk about why desperation affects you so deeply. And the thing is, the desperation doesn't just show up in your thoughts, it takes over your entire nervous system. It's not just a mood or a moment, it's a full body state of survival. When you're in it, that desperate headspace, your brain starts sounding the alarm constantly, going, this is urgent, this is bad, fix it now. And the longer you're stuck in that panic loop, the more your ability to think clearly starts to erode. Your focus narrows. Your sense of time gets distorted. You stop thinking about long-term consequences and start chasing short-term relief instead. And the worst part is that you might not even realize it's happening until well after the damage is done. Because desperation pulls you into all or nothing thinking. It convinces you that whatever you're facing is either going to make or break everything. That you only have one last shot to fix it, and if you fail, then it's all over. It takes ordinary problems and turns them into emotional emergencies. And that kind of thinking is exhausting because it keeps your nervous system on high alert and your sense of safety constantly under threat. And that's why people in a desperate state often act in desperate ways that feel out of character. Maybe you've messaged someone that you swore you were done with, or perhaps you've made a big financial decision without really thinking it through. Maybe you've shut down completely, or exploded over something small, or convinced yourself that nothing matters, so you might as well just give up. And that's not because you're being melodramatic. It's because your brain has shifted into survival mode. And survival is not about logic. It's about survival. And that's how you end up impulse texting your ex, or buying a $700 air fryer, or Googling how to disappear without faking your death at 2 a.m. But here's where it gets more complicated. Desperation doesn't always feel frantic. Sometimes it looks like numbness or helplessness. Sometimes it feels like bargaining, like trying to fix everything around you so you don't have to face what's really going on inside. You might tell yourself, if I can just fix everything and keep everyone happy, then I won't have to actually deal with how much I'm falling apart inside, which, hey, it's relatable, but it's not sustainable. It can even feel like you're overfunctioning, like you're taking on too much, or doing too much, or just saying yes when you know that you should be saying no. And all because you're afraid that slowing down will force you to feel what's really going on inside. So, you stay busy. You stay activated, because if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. But underneath it all, you're barely holding on. And then there's the shame. Desperation doesn't just create chaos, it often follows it with a flood of regret. You question your judgment. You beat yourself up for not handling things better. You feel embarrassed about how you reacted, or afraid that you've pushed people away. That shame adds another layer of pressure, which just feeds the cycle. You feel desperate, so you act impulsively. And then you regret it. And then you feel even more desperate. And the loop goes on and on and on. It's like your own private encore of my greatest hot mess hits, the things I shouldn't have said but definitely did, on repeat at full volume. It's exhausting. It's isolating. And it's a battle that more people are fighting than you probably realize. Because the truth is that desperation absolutely thrives in silence. It feeds off your belief that you're the only one who feels this way, that nobody else would or could possibly understand, and nobody else would react like this. But that's just not true. You're not weak, you're not broken, there's nothing wrong with you, you are overwhelmed, and your brain is trying to protect you, even if it's doing a really messy job of it. When you start to see desperation not as a character flaw, but as a nervous system overload, that's when everything begins to shift. Because you can begin to realize that it's not about needing to be stronger, it's about needing to feel safe enough to not be in survival mode all the time. And let's face it, that's what this whole better mental health thing that I talk about on this show is really about. It's learning to understand yourself even in the messy moments, and finding ways to be kinder to yourself and to meet your needs without completely self-destructing in the process. So if any of what I've just described feels familiar, if you've been stuck in that cycle of panic or shame or emotional overload, then stick around, because right after the break, I'm going to walk you through how to interrupt that spiral so you can start responding in calmer and more grounded ways, even when everything around you still feels like chaos. And welcome back. If you're still here, then great, because that tells me that you're ready to do something different. Not out of desperation, but out of clarity, which is fantastic because nothing changes if nothing changes. Because while desperation might scramble your thinking and push you to react impulsively, there is a way to slow it all down and respond more thoughtfully from a place of strength instead of fear. And that's what we're going to explore now. So let's talk about how to go from desperate to grounded. So throughout this episode, we've been talking about the fact that when you're desperate, it's easy to feel like there's no way out, but there is. I'm going to walk you through a 3-step process to help you shift from chaos to clarity. So first, we'll look at ways to interrupt the spiral so you can stop making fear-driven decisions. Then we'll explore how to shift your mental state so you can think more clearly. And then we'll talk about how to respond with intention, so you're making choices that protect your peace instead of tearing it down. And after all that, I'll give you some extra tips for your longer-term mental well-being. Okay, first, recognize the desperation for what it is. This is about interrupting the panic spiral, and one of the most straightforward ways to do that is to say it out loud. For example, I'm feeling desperate right now. It might sound overly simple, but naming it creates just enough space between you and the feeling to stop it from taking over. Most of us don't realize we're in that desperate state until we've already reacted. And so recognizing it early is the first act of power. It doesn't mean that you have a solution yet. It just means that you've caught yourself before the panic makes the decisions, and that you're aware of what's going on. Next, use cold to snap yourself out of the spiral. When your brain is spiraling, logic isn't going to help, but a jolt of physical sensation just might. Splash some cold water on your face, or hold an ice cube, or if the air is brisk outside, then step outside for a minute. That sudden shift can jolt your nervous system out of panic mode and back into the present moment. Look, it's not magic, but it is a reset button, and that means you can be more aware of what's happening so that you can then slow down and deal with things more thoughtfully rather than just reacting. And so that leads to my next tip: slow your breathing and your body will follow. Desperation speeds everything up: your heart, your thoughts, your reflexes. To interrupt it, focus on your breath. Try a simple 4-4-6 rhythm. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. The longer exhale helps to release built-up tension, and the slower breathing tells your body and brain that you're safe. After a few rounds, you'll notice that your heart rate eases and your shoulders begin to drop. And this really works because your brain can't think clearly until your body feels safe. Okay, next, make a do-nothing plan. All right, so this one will probably feel a bit counterintuitive, but when you're desperate, your impulse is usually to do something immediately, even if it's destructive. Instead, choose to do nothing for a set amount of time. It could be 15 minutes, an hour, or an entire evening. You're not avoiding the problem, you're avoiding reacting while your mind is in the middle of a storm. Stillness might be the bravest thing you can do, and it helps to give you the space you need to process things so you can respond far more thoughtfully. Next, ask yourself, what am I trying to control right now? Desperation often comes from feeling powerless, and we try to fix that by grabbing control wherever we can. But not everything is ours to control. So gently ask yourself, what outcome am I clinging to? What fear is underneath this urgency? Letting go, even a little, can feel absolutely terrifying, but it can also feel like relief. If letting go is something that you struggle with, then check out episode 296 to explore that topic further. Okay, next, ask yourself, what would the calm version of me do? In the heat of the moment, instead of just reacting, take a moment to ask yourself, if I were grounded and calm, what would I want to do right now? Now, you don't have to be that version of yourself immediately. This is about just imagining them. That tiny shift in your perspective can interrupt the desperate voice, and it can reconnect you to who you actually want to be. Next, don't make big decisions in a desperate state. This is about being thoughtful and intentional, and it's also about being deliberate and considered. Desperation will tell you that now is your last chance, or that you have to do something immediately in order to move on. But that's a lie. That's how people end up going blonde when they're in the middle of a crisis. Don't think I don't see you there eyeing off that bottle of hair dye. Whatever big decision you're contemplating, wait. Give it 48 hours, seriously. If it's the right choice, like quitting or ending something or spending a large amount or walking away from something, then it'll still be right when your nervous system is calm. But if it's not, then you've just saved yourself a lot of regret. Honestly, your peace is worth the pause, and 48 hours is not an eternity. The only exception I'd say to this is if you're in danger. And in that case, ignore everything I said and hit the road right now, if not sooner. Okay, next, identify what the desperation is really about. The thing about desperation is that it's rarely about the thing, the text, or the deadline, or the argument, or whatever set it off. Desperation is often a symptom of something much, much deeper. It's fear of abandonment, fear of failure, the concerns we have about not being good enough. The urgency surrounding it is real, but it's actually pointing to something much deeper underneath. So get curious. Ask yourself, what am I really afraid of right now? The more you understand what's going on inside, the more work you can do to address the root cause of your issues. And that's where the healing begins. Next, focus only on the next 24 hours. Look, if you're feeling desperate, you really don't need to know how you're going to fix your entire life. You just need to get through today. So ask yourself, what would support me just for now? The smaller the goal, the more achievable it is. Clarity starts with simplicity. So take things one day at a time and one step at a time. Next, reach out for connection, even if it's awkward. Desperation often isolates you, and shame keeps you there. So instead, break that cycle. Message someone. Say to them, hey, I'm not doing great. You don't have to spill your entire soul. Just let someone know you're not okay, or pick the phone up and talk to them. I know, retro, right? Being seen or heard, even briefly, can stop the spiral from swallowing you whole. Next, let this moment be a teacher, eventually. Once the intensity passes, take a gentle look back at what happened. Not to shame yourself or to judge, but to learn. Ask yourself, what did I actually learn from this? What was I really needing? What could I try next time? Growth doesn't come from perfection. It comes from honesty. And this moment, however messy, is part of that. And that leads to my next point. Make space to process, not just recover. Once the intensity of feeling desperate has passed, don't just move on and pretend that it didn't happen. Sit with it gently, even if that's uncomfortable to do. Take a moment and ask yourself, what triggered the spiral? What patterns showed up? What deeper pain might be hiding underneath? Processing doesn't mean that you sit there and wallow in your feelings. It means facing what happened with curiosity and compassion instead of shame and judgment, because that's how you stop the same thing from repeating. Desperation isn't just a reaction, it's a signal, and it's telling you that something needs to change. So don't ignore what it's trying to tell you. Next, build a safety net routine for your mental health. This is one of those bigger picture long-term things. The thing is, you don't need to overhaul your entire life, but you do need a few consistent and stabilizing practices that you can actually lean on before things fall apart, rather than waiting until everything hits the fan. Think of it like emotional scaffolding, some daily movement, regular check-ins with people that you trust, setting and maintaining boundaries around rest, etc. You're not doing these things for anyone else's benefit. You're doing them for you and to give your nervous system something predictable and safe, because that's what helps to reduce reactivity and desperation over time. Next, work on the root cause, not just the symptoms. Desperation is often the surface-level expression of unhealed stuff like unmet needs, trauma, people-pleasing, abandonment wounds, etc. So if you want to reduce how often desperation shows up in your life, then you need to start getting curious about what's underneath. Therapy can help. So can journaling, self-education, and honest conversations. The more honest you are with yourself about what hurts, the less desperate your future responses need to be. That's the work. It's not just reacting better, but hurting less often and less intensely in the first place. Here's the thing. Desperation makes you feel like everything is urgent and nothing is fixable, but reacting from that headspace only creates more chaos. Learning to slow down, breathe, process, and then respond differently is how you take your power back. Because when it comes to feeling desperate, what it all boils down to is this. You don't need to escape the feeling of desperation. You just need to stop letting it control your next move. Now, what are you going to do with what you've learned today? What's one thing you can do differently next time you feel desperate? Something that supports you instead of harms you. Because you're in control of how you choose to respond to your feelings. The choice is yours, as it is with all things related to your well-being. So, what choice will you make today? Each week I like to finish up by sharing a quote about the week's topic, and I encourage you to take a few moments to really reflect on it and consider what it means to you. This week's quote is by an unknown author, and it is, "Don't let desperate situations make you do desperate things." Let me repeat that. Don't let desperate situations make you do desperate things. All right, that's nearly it for this week. Sign up for my weekly newsletter at ltamh.com and support me on Patreon for early access to ad-free extended episodes. They're both linked in the description. Thank you very much for joining me today. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to share positivity and kindness out into the world, because you get back what you put out. Take care and talk to you next time. You'll also find my episode about control helpful. It's linked in the description. Next week, I'll be talking about mindset. Follow or subscribe to never miss an episode, and have a great week. Let's Talk About Mental Health is an independent program. Discover more at ltamh.com.